Hey, what's up, guys? So today in this video, I wanted to talk about something that I've recently started doing. What I've started doing is I've started experimenting slash incorporating 2-a-day training into my workout routine. So basically, what that means and how I structure it personally is I will have whatever bigger muscle group I have for that day in the morning that I wanted to train, and then I'll have whatever smaller muscle groups, more accessory work, quote unquote, in the PM or later on in the day. So what that will look like, for example, with today, this is my horizontal pulling emphasis day. I split my push days into like more vertical pulling emphasis and more of a horizontal pulling emphasis days, just because it makes sense. The architecture of the back, it's very complex. And if I can overload a little bit more on my rows one day, and I can overload a little bit more on my pull-ups or my pull-downs on another day, like I feel like that's going to be the most stimulative for muscle growth and hypertrophy. But for example, today I did horizontal pulling where I did hammer strength rows. I did 6 sets of these, 3 top sets and 3 back down sets. The back down sets, I'll basically reduce the weight by about 10% or 15% of the weight, and then still train and respective to that week's RPE. This week's RPE was 6 since it's the beginning of my mesocycle. Research has shown that RPEs of 6 or having 4 reps in reserve are stimulative enough for hypertrophy. Anything below that, it's not really that beneficial. But yeah, anyways, so I did my rows here, and then I did 2 sets of overhand assisted pull-ups, and then I did some cable crunches, and that was my AM session for today. And then later on, I came in and I did my biceps. So I did 6 sets of hammer curls, and then some shoulders, and then I did some cardio. And so the whole benefit to doing this is intensity, principally. So everybody knows from experience, if you've ever lifted weights and you try to get through a full set session, after you've done your heavy compound lifts, let's say it's a bench press, let's say it's a row, let's say it's a squat or whatever, those accessory movements towards the end of your workouts generally tend to suffer because of intra-session fatigue and glycogen depletion that comes with training. So, as we are training, we are accumulating fatigue and we are also depleting glycogen, which means that we're going to have less energy or less capability / potential to just put a maximum output into our training. And so while we do, and so like this helps with every single key driver of hypertrophy, which is mechanical tension, progressive overload. That's basically what mechanical tension is, muscle damage, and then metabolite accumulation. So it helps with every single one of those parts of your training. And so when I'm splitting it up and I'm hitting my rows in the morning, and then I'm hitting my biceps at night, I can have much more intensity and be able to overload just like that slight margin more. And so when we're talking about these margins, like we're not talking about like huge differences, but we are talking about small and meaningful differences, about around like 5-10% or something. If I had to put it there, that's about how much of a difference that you are getting. And so from doing this, I've been able to see a lot more progress on my smaller muscle groups I would normally neglect. Like my biceps generally get put towards the end of the workout, or my shoulders, or my triceps, or whatever more accessory movement that I would have for that day, like especially abs and calves, would just be totally just don't really want to do it, just get through it. And now my whole psychology with each training session is just I feel a lot more recovered coming in. My training sessions are not as long. They don't feel as difficult, which means I can have more progressive overload, I can have more muscle damage, and I can accumulate more metabolites in my muscle. And we're talking about muscle damage, we're talking about, the pump, how much your muscles, or like your myofibrils, sarcomeres are actually being broken down. And then we're talking about metabolites. We're talking about things like lactic acid, like that burn and getting that pump. And then, muscle damage and metabolite accumulation, they do have a big part in, it's not a huge part, but they do play a pretty key part in hypertrophy. Like they are definitely contributors. So it's something that you shouldn't really neglect. So I wanted to talk about like a few of the things like how I make my 2-a-day training work. So first off, I have had to increase my meal frequency to about 5 to 6 meals per day. And that's like a lot, but like in all honesty, like if you're going to do this, the whole goal of this is to have that performance advantage. And so if I'm having these really big meals in between my sessions, one, they take longer to digest. Two, there's no point really because ideally I want to have a pre-workout meal before my morning session, and then a post-workout meal after that, and then I want to have another pre-workout meal before my PM session, and another pre-workout meal after. So like by default, I'm automatically basically going to be having at least 4 meals per day. And then around that training, I don't want to eat too much because I don't want to, be worrying about digesting that food or whatever. I want to be able actually to get these performance benefits that come from 2-a-day training because that's the whole point of doing it. If you're doing 2-a-day training, like you already give a crap about, these small things like nutrient timing and whatever. And so what I will focus on is, in terms of the macronutrients, I like to keep protein around 1/8 of my total, 1/8 to my total daily intake of protein. So that's going to look at something like 25 to 35 grams of protein per feeding. I'm going to try to have mostly high glycemic carbohydrates like pasta, rice, white bread, stuff like that. White potatoes, stuff that are higher on the glycemic index scale that can get to my bloodstream and that can actually get to my muscles faster and help with that recovery process and depleting glycogen. And then I'm also going to try to minimize fats for each one of those meals around my training to about 10% of my daily intake. And the reason why fats are kept low is because fats slow down the absorption of these other nutrients. And that's a problem in terms of protein and carbohydrates because those are going to be the biggest ones with our performance in the gym. Protein is going to be rebuilding the muscle, and then carbohydrates are going to be giving you that energy for each session that you need. So, I have to be a little bit more meticulous with this, but in all honesty, I've seen improvements in like my digestion and like how I feel overall. And like this is just something that I've personally found is meaningful for me. Now, I want to ask who is 2-a-day training for? One, it has to kind of like quote unquote fit your lifestyle or fit your goals, right? So if you're just doing this for fun, it's just like a hobby thing. Do I think 2-a-day training really makes sense for you? No. But for somebody like me, who my eventual goal is I want to compete, and be very, very competitive in both bodybuilding and powerlifting. Eventually I'll specialize, the more experience I get and then figure out what I want. But, this is what's going to help give me that 5% advantage. Like 5% is the difference between, first and fifth place, at those higher levels of competition. So whatever edge I can get, I want to take. And so it's not necessary by any means. This is just something that I've been doing and I've personally been enjoying. In terms of spreading them out throughout the day, I'd preferably like to do it. I have my AM session, and then I'll have about 4 to 6 hours in between sessions. More around 6, honestly, just because that will actually allow for some recovery to take place. I can get a couple meals in and have them digested, and help have a little bit more recovery per session, and then come in for my PM session and feel good. Something that I really do want to note though is that a lot of people, if you do try this, you'll be like, oh, I'm less tired. And you kind of tempted to like do more to make yourself feel tired. Well, that kind of goes completely against the principle of like why we're even doing this in the first place. Like the whole reason why you do 2-a-days is so that you are less fatigued, is so that you are less tired. So then therefore you can put more intensity and make your hard sets hard enough and be able to have the overload, like that small meaningful difference in overload that does make a difference over time that you otherwise wouldn't be able to have. So, and this is something that I have been doing, like I said recently, and I'm going to try my best to keep it going, for as long as I possibly can, just because I love the results, I love how I feel. It feels really good. I really like doing it, knowing that I'm doing, things as optimal as possible. It matters to me, and I think that anybody who's seen my physique progression recently, especially, can agree that like there have been big improvements on especially areas I was lagging on. So I was like, especially with my arms and with my legs. So that's basically the video. If you guys have any questions, please leave a comment down below. If you guys are interested in custom programs, coaching, or meal plans from myself, just make sure to click the link in my bio to check it out. And then I'm also going to be having something pretty cool dropping on the 13th, and head to New Jersey then too, hang out with Quinn. So stay tuned and make sure to follow my Instagram account to have more updates on that. And yeah, thanks for watching the video, guys. Have a good one.